At the Combine, Duke Tobin said that he didn't want to pay more for the same team, but judging from Zac Taylor's comments at owners' meetings in Florida, the Bengals are pretty close to paying more for the same team with free agency activity mostly finished. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien, and we're Locked On Bengals on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And if you're new to the show and you want to become an everydayer, like all the everydayer Bengals fans out there that are the most educated Bengals fans at the water cooler, which I'm told still exists in some offices, in some workplaces.
People still go into the office?
Yeah, right. You're in the right place nonetheless. Maybe it's a barbecue on Friday night and you want to flex your Bengals mind, and you're in a great place to get all the information you need. Hit that subscribe button, hit the bell on YouTube, and you'll not miss an episode of Locked On Bengals and join the many other everydayers out there. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime, where you can use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase of tickets. And Zac Taylor comments from Coach's Breakfast with the media on Monday down in Florida. And Katie Blackburn did meet with the media on Tuesday. We'll have those takeaways for you tomorrow. But James back with me after a day away yesterday. And, well, yesterday we spent time with Joe Goodberry talking about the draft angle of we're now sure there's not another guard coming before the draft. Or pretty dang sure. I mean, never say never, I guess, as Calais Campbell signed today with Arizona. And that move didn't happen, for example. But now knowing that free agency activity is mostly done because we've heard it from the horse's mouth. You could have read between the lines and come to this conclusion before. That's why I've said, James, on this show in the last couple of weeks, like, I'll believe there's another move when I see it. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about some other moves that would help. But let's start there, James. Haven't talked to you since then. What's your first reaction? What are your thoughts around the Bengals not pending another veteran move here anytime soon?
It was the biggest fear, honestly, that anyone should have at really any point this offseason. Like, this is such an important position for the Bengals because they've been so bad at it. It's been like everyone's focused on the defense, right? Because the defense was really, really bad last year. And I get it. Guard has derailed this team at one point or another for the entire Joe Burrow era, half a decade. It's been a big reason why they've either the season ended, Joe Burrow got hurt, mixture of both, or he's taken too many hits and it's hit. And then eventually it's his right tackle that costs him. You know, like, guard is clearly the biggest weakness on the team. And for the Bengals to continue to go into the draft, like last year, they had multiple needs going into the draft, like major needs, like both tackle spots, right? Right tackle and defensive tackle, just huge focuses. This year, it's going to be guard and everything on defense in a draft that's really good at tight end in the first few rounds, that's really good at running back. And if you say, oh, we'll take a running back in, let's just say round 2, people are going to yell at you. And they're going to yell at you because they're worried about Joe Burrow and protecting him and getting after opposing quarterbacks. And those are things that you should have handled in free agency to a much greater extent. And guard is number 1 on that list. Also because it doesn't cost nearly as much as some of these high-end pass rushers. Like, you could treat guard, like, let's just say the Bengals don't value guard, and it's very clear they don't. You could treat guard like they've treated tight end and go with 1-year veteran deals. Let's say they had signed Tevin Jenkins for 1 year, $4 million. You feel different about the guard room? You probably do, at least a little bit. And you could go year by year. You don't need to go any other route there. I'm not asking for them to go sign a $20 million per year guard. And yet here we are again, going into a draft that they're going to have to do some really good scouting from that perspective, where they could just fill this hole in free agency and not really have to worry about it from a draft standpoint.
Yeah, we talked about the draft impact quite a bit on yesterday's show. I was talking with Joe Goodberry there. We were talking about, well, how do you make sure you get a guard then on day 1 or day 2?
Ugh,
You wait to day 3, and now
there's
it's
not.
because you need a starter, right? You need a
Yep.
guy that's going to be able to play for you right away. That does force your hand. And the Bengals have a history of doing this to themselves where there is a need for someone who can play for you right away. And while it's fun and talked about this with Joe yesterday to imagine that you can get an instant impact rookie, that you can get a Jamar Chase, that you can get a Joe Burrow, that you can get a T. Higgins, that you can get a Jesse Bates, Cam Taylor Britt's rookie year. Take those examples and get guys that can contribute for you right away. It doesn't always happen that way. And you have growing pains with rookies, even when they're rookies that you expect to be really good in their second and third years and over the life of their rookie deals. It's not always sunshine and roses for rookies in the NFL. It's a transition for most players, except for those that are truly transcendent most of the time. And there are certain positions where you can get instant impact, but they're not really the positions where the Bengals need help right now. Maybe linebacker, right? Talked about this with Joe yesterday too. But
Yeah.
when you leave yourself in that spot, and we do have to talk about it a little bit, what do you do then if, Will Johnson falls to you in the first round, for example, and now you've taken a corner who maybe say Will Johnson is a top 10 player for you. You've taken a corner who you see as a value prospect in the first round,
Mhm.
and you still need a defensive tackle and an edge rusher and a guard that can contribute for you all in year one, a guard that can start. Now you're forcing a guard in the second round. You want to get a guard that can start. And now you're only addressing one of those other defensive spots on day 1, day 2. And the
Yeah.
talent drop-offs happen, right? Between round 2, round 3. And so that's the prospect you're not dealing with. If there's a value faller, maybe it's a tight end that you love so much, James. You talked about this being a good tight end class. Maybe it's a Colston Loveland. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
Tyler Warren.
They
And
should be in on those guys, by the way. People aren't ready for it, but they should keep going.
well, and say the Bengals go that way.
Yeah.
And they take that player that I think the Bengals see as a luxury. I don't think that they are going to be considering it as much as we'll talk about. They should put themselves in a position where they should be able to consider it.
Sure.
But say they do, and they draft a player, and now you're second and third rounds looking for starter, guard, and impact defensive lineman. That's a heck of a challenge that you're putting yourself in.
It's nearly impossible to thread the needle the way they're trying to thread the needle. And even if they nail the draft, they're still gonna it's gonna feel like, oh well, they could still use a guy here, use a guy there, and like a real dude that can play legitimate snaps for them.
And do they do that?
Well, they should have already done it. That's what's so dumb. Like if you sign, let's say you sign Tevin. I'm going to keep bringing up Tevin Jenkins. It doesn't need to be Tevin Jenkins. It could be insert whoever, right? It could be Calais Campbell and Will Hernandez. And who knows, maybe they end up signing Will Hernandez. But if you have another proven guy there in these spots, then you don't feel the need to force it if it doesn't fall your way. If things go much differently than expected. I'm not saying they should draft Colston Loveland 17th overall, but they should feel comfortable with the roster enough to do that. Like that's a much different conversation. And if you don't feel comfortable with your roster, you certainly shouldn't be shutting down the idea. This is the other part, shutting down the idea of adding a guard or adding a piece before the draft. Like what in what world? Like last I checked, and I get it, I missed yesterday. We do the show every day. 5 days a week. Only Daily Bengals podcast. We're not just taking off until the draft. And I get it. You got to set your draft board and all of those things. But if you can make your team better, which they can in free agency still, and there's no free agency deadline, why would you say, yeah, probably not going to do anything until after the draft? Like that doesn't make any sense to view it that way. And I've also heard this, Jake. Well, maybe they just don't value guard, like these guards that are available the way you do, James. And someone tweeted, and I forget his name. It's a good point. It's interesting. Or the way Jake does, or the way Joe does, or the way you do, James. And I was like, well, yeah, they don't have the equity, one, to say, oh yeah, we don't value these guys because they've stunk at guard throughout the Joe Burrow era. And two, well, then what about all the other weaknesses on the roster? Why haven't you addressed them? Like this is clearly not an evaluation thing. This is a resources thing, and in how they view the resources that they have, where don't have. And I say the don't have in quotes.
Yeah. And I want to get into that a little bit more as
Ugh.
far as the valuing of positions and players and money and all these things. We'll continue that conversation here coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd. Maybe you want to check out the Cincinnati Reds and Ellie De La Cruz. Maybe you want to check out Tito Francona, GABP. Yes, the Reds, at least as we're chatting, 2-2 on the season. Well, getting tickets to Reds games shouldn't be stressful. Getting tickets to all of your favorite live events all spring and summer long, whether it's concerts, whether it's the NBA playoffs, or looking ahead to the 2025 NFL season. Who knows? Maybe the Bengals will have quality starting guards by then. Regardless, you can watch them in person with Gametime. The beauty about Gametime is they have Gametime picks, and it's going to make it so much easier to find better value because it filters out all of the unnecessary tickets so you can focus on the best values. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Locked On NFL. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Repeating some themes that we've talked about on this podcast and trying not to be a broken drum about it, but the place that you're in now,
A broken drum.
a broken drum.
Whoa. Broken record, but
Record. What? Beat?
broken drum. I mean, it works, right?
Yeah, you
I
wouldn't
guess
want to hit a
record
broken
spin,
drum.
drum doesn't. Yeah.
It wouldn't sound very good if you hit a broken drum. Anyway.
You're a broken drum.
Yep.
The Bengals are a broken drum when it comes to guard evaluation.
The pressure on not just the draft, but the coaching staff and the young players is just astronomical right now, right? And your team is not going to be perfect in the NFL. There's going to be a flaw. You can pick your flaws to some degree. The Bengals have chosen, we are not going to be flawed at wide receiver. We're not going to be flawed at quarterback. That's where we're spending our money. We're good there. We feel good about our center. We feel good about our tackles. And on offense, at least, that's a whole lot of points where you're not flawed. But as you brought up, this idea that they don't value the guard position, I would hope that at some point that would be challenged. And I think one challenging part about finding the way to get the Bengals to consider the status quo there, where they're not considering guard to be a high value position, is they have been so bad at drafting. And it's not just guard. It's across the offensive line where we feel good about Amarius Mims. Don't get me wrong. But the track record of drafting across the offensive line is so poor. Like, what if they hit on a guard? What if Jackson Carman turned into a Pro Bowl level guard? Or Cordell Bolson turned into a Pro Bowl level guard?
There you go. All right.
It doesn't matter who it is. Ideally,
I know
your
what you
second round
meant.
pick at guard turns into a Pro Bowler, right? Like that's the kind of hope you should have for a second round pick at guard. So taking away everything we know about these guys, if they become good players, say Billy Price becomes a Pro Bowl level center, and center's a position that they value more highly than guard.
I have so many jokes with these guys.
But I'm not even trying to be funny. Like,
I know you're not.
It's not about the specific guys. It's about the investment in the position in the draft, and then the lack of second contract players or players worthy of a second contract. If they have a Quentin Nelson in the building as a rookie and they see the guy play well, are they treating him the same way they treated Kevin Zeitler and Eric Steinbach and the other guards that have walked out the building?
Max Montoya. Think about that. 80s.
Goes back.
It's the point is, he ended his career with the rate. He played against the Bengals in a playoff game. Like, that's wild. Like, I'm 99% sure. What, 91, right? Raiders, Bengals, 91. Am I right about that? Oh, no, it was week 13, 91. Anyways, the point is the point. But, yeah, that's when you're bringing up those guys and you're bringing up the investment and then you bring up, their last quality guard, like quality starting level guard, that they drafted was Clint Bowling.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2011, right? What were you doing in 2011? I was at the University of Cincinnati in year 3. No, year 2. Year 2 for me
Yeah.
at
I,
UC. You?
I was in my second year doing healthcare IT work. It was before I left that job to work for Pro Football Focus. I think that was a year and a half later.
There you go. All right. And I worked in insurance. I was, what, 2011? So I'm not even 21 yet, just to give you the idea there of where it was at when they drafted their last quality starting guard. And so for them to put the pressure on themselves to say, hey, we had this super awesome quarterback and the super awesome wide receiver unit, and we're keeping Mike Gesicki. And yeah, we have issues on defense, but we think the coaching staff is going to fix those. And by the way, that's a lot of pressure, to your point. But we're also going to put a lot of pressure on this new offensive line coach to either get more out of Cordell Volson or maximize what we have in Cody Ford. We know what Cody Ford is. We know what Lucas Patrick is. And sorry, and I like Cordell, and I've been a Cordell Volson backer. We know what Cordell Volson is too. Like, at some point, you are what you are. And that's not bad. I think Cordell Volson deserves to be in the NFL and is going to have a long career. But is he a starter in a drop back passing offense that's going to throw it a ton? Like, it's got a lot to show. So that's a lot of pressure on Scott Peters. And it's a lot of pressure on a franchise to go into a draft that honestly doesn't have a lot of pure guards anyway. Get ready for the guard tackle or the tackle guard process in the draft. That's going to happen. If they get a starting guard, it's probably going to be a tackle, a college tackle.
We did talk a lot about that yesterday.
Yeah. Like
that topic was covered.
Yeah. Buckle up, because that's coming. And that's, by the way, we didn't talk about that that's now me, Jake, and Joe all agreeing without talking about it. It just feels so risky. And maybe they have a backdoor deal where they think they can get Brandon Scherf in a month. Maybe. But again, feels risky with something that's that precious and that important. And
you're an offense that, as you keep emphasizing, is the pass happiest offense in the NFL, likes to go 5 in the pattern, likes to go 5 in protection. And that inevitably will leave your guys in one-on-one situations sometimes. And Joe Burrow gets rid of the ball as fast as anyone in the NFL. He is great at protecting himself in those situations by knowing what the defense is doing and getting the ball out accurately on time to an open player, as good as anyone in the NFL at that. That's a real strength of your team. But when you look at the pass protection trends for the Bengals, and I know they're a pass-heavy team, and this was always going to look a little bit worse than some other teams around the league, the softness of the pocket where those guards are protecting has been an issue, and was very visibly an issue in 2024 when Joe Burrow was at his best escaping pressure, and he still took a ton of hits and a ton of sacks and a ton of pressures. And so despite all those things, I don't understand how you look at what you're trying to do as an offense right now, and there's not a paradigm shift. Maybe 15 years ago, not valuing guards was a market inefficiency that the Bengals were actually right about. But at this point, with this quarterback, with this offense, what do we have to do to get you to reevaluate some positional values and the way you want to invest and build your roster around the pieces you have? Like what's that going to take? Because this offseason, you've shown that you're clearly not changing your approach in free agency. So that's not changing anytime soon. Yep. I asked a question earlier this offseason, if not now, when? Not this year. So when do these other norms get changed? As they say, they consider these things on a case-by-case basis, but continue to show certain patterns that leave us wanting and frustrated and wondering if they've done just enough, because they'll always have enough to be frisky, but you got to be more than that right now. That's what we're looking for. The more, it was like the theme of the offseason. Like every Dares have heard me say it a ton, that I was always going to ask for more. And the problem is like, if they had done like 3 more moves, I would still be saying that. Like that was the mindset coming into the year. And this has been pretty darn underwhelming.
Like if the receivers, which shouldn't have held up anything, but if the receivers are really getting in the way of you signing guards, well, then tell the receivers to wait. Because they were on the roster. They were on the team. T wasn't technically under contract, but he was under team control. That's why you tag him. And so understand your weaknesses in now going into a draft. And I don't care if they have 30 picks. Let's dismiss that part, even though it would be easier. I get it. Like, let's say they had 8 picks or 10 picks like last year. How good does last year's draft feel? Doesn't feel great. Like, and I get it. It bolsters your chances of having hits, but it's just so much pressure to get instant impact, which they've struggled to do since drafting Jamar Chase. And you could say Amarius Mims last year, fine, but think about that. It's a tough place to be in. We'll continue the conversation coming up next.
Is there a path to instant impact via changing the offseason plan? I just come back to this putting a ton on coaches.
Oh, dude.
And
yeah,
Zac Taylor's talking about playing starters more in the preseason. Rookies are going to play in the preseason either way. But I do want to get to that point. It's just the position they've left themselves in to fill some of the holes is tough. And that's the bottom line at this point is we'll see what happens with development. We'll see what happens with some of the young players, the new defensive coaching staff. There's a lot of we'll see. Right now, we'll see what the draft brings. We'll see if they acquire more picks. We'll see what players they acquire. We'll see where those holes are eventually. But if you look at the team as it is right now, it's largely the same.
Yep.
They had a nose tackle. They had some Samaje Perine, both useful pieces. They add Lucas Patrick, all useful pieces. We're hoping for a little bit more than useful pieces.
Can you imagine if I said 2 months ago, hey, Jake, the Bengals' biggest free agent addition, external free agent addition, is going to be TJ Slayton? 98% of our audience would say who?
I would have said who. I would have had to look him up.
You'd say. And by the way, that's fine. You're not supposed to know every nose tackle in the NFL. And TJ Slayton is a heck of an addition. I like it a lot. They needed that, right? That's a huge need they addressed. That cannot be the standard for a team that was 9-8 last year and at one point 4-8 and started 0-3 and started 1-4 and fell to 4-8 when they couldn't stop Russell Wilson and was just struggled to finish games on offense. That's why there's so many things here, but like this idea that, all right, well, the preseason, playing these guys in the preseason is going to help. They got so many reps last year. And I know a lot of people want to see these guys in the preseason. They got so many reps last year, and Burrow was coming back from the wrist. So he didn't play great. You had the Jamar contract thing. In that impacted Jamar clearly. T gets hurt 2 days before. Like sometimes it is circumstantial. And I think that Zach is doing this because he does feel the pressure. And what I really hope is if they play these guys that they avoid, you always hope that you're avoiding injury. But man, I don't hope an injury happens because I don't think it matters that much. I really don't. Like, what is an extra 10 plays of preseason football going to do? Maybe it does the world. I don't think it's going to. And if you're going to play that much more, then I just think it's an unnecessary risk for a team that is going to come out desperate when you really shouldn't feel that way or go into a season feeling desperate more desperate than you would in any other year. You obviously want to start fast. But it's something to keep an eye on. And I think people are going to be excited to see these guys more in the preseason, but I'm a bit more leery.
I do understand it from the perspective that Joe Burrow gets better with reps, live reps. And I know you can get some of that in joint practices. We'll see what the joint practice schedule looks like this year. What or how many, if or how many joint practices they'll have, because that's valuable too. But Joe Burrow is a guy that has repeatedly said, and I believe him when he says this, that the live reps are extremely useful for him. And it's not just getting in and out of the huddle, although that is going to be a point of emphasis for me for the Bengals this year, because getting in and out of the huddle was just such a consistent problem for them in 2024. It really has been for a while. Like, I don't know what needs to change with Zach and Joe communicating, but to get the play in, get those play calls in faster, but that does need to be better. Nitpicking. Joe Burrow can start better, and he's had issues. Don't get me wrong. There have been reasons, there have been explanations for the starts.
Yep.
The calf,
Health. It's health. Yeah.
the appendix, the wrist, the ACL. Yep. There's been a lot. Hopefully we get to a regular season game without an issue like that this year. But he gets better with reps. And so I don't know how many reps it needs to be. I don't know if preseason can give you those kinds of reps.
I know. Where defenses are disguising and doing all this stuff like that he needs, like, or probably wants. Like, defenses don't do that in the preseason.
Or maybe it's just that he needs to feel something approximating game speed. And he just needs that to click back right in his brain. I don't know what it is exactly, but he is a player that gets better with reps.
No doubt.
And so from that perspective, I do understand getting him reps. I do get it. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I think that there's a great argument for preseason play this year.
Well, sure.
Just because you're probably doing something different. Your baseline is going to be different with Al Golden than it was with Lou Anarumo. And so I get it on that side. But go ahead.
It's just play the defense as much as you want. The season ends if Joe gets nicked up. Like, that's
for sure.
And so that's why it's really tough. And I know, agree. It's really tough, especially now. Let's tie it back to the beginning of the show. Hey, rookie guard, go protect for Joe Burrow in preseason game number 1. And then after there's film on you, game number 2, and do it against guys fighting for their NFL lives and veterans that are fighting for a job. And it's just a meaningless game, and all it takes is a play. And that's where it's just tough, because Joe can get hit in those games. And I get it. Brady played in them, and you could say, fine. It is different now. And the last thing you need is another, because it's been every year. The wrist bothered Joe. It was a topic throughout camp. And it
still is,
a topic
really.
It bothered Joe. And that's a big part of why you started so slow last year. You don't want to admit it, right? But it was. They beat New England if Joe Burrow is playing like 50% of Joe Burrow, and he just clearly wasn't. He's still battling the wrist.
But that also goes to his mentality in that game, like being ready for game speed, being ready for that environment where he was sped up in that game. It wasn't just the wrist to me. I'm sure that was part of the rationale for it, part of the subconscious issue there, but he was sped up in that game. And so mentally he wasn't where he needed to be either. And so if you can find a way to do that safely in the preseason, I'm all for it, because that is the engine for your team.
Have Jake Liscow be a 12th defender rushing Burrow in practice.
There you go.
And Jake gets to hit Joe in the shoulder pad. Boom.
He will not even feel me. There's this time in high school. There's this time in high school I tried to tackle this guy who was going to go play college basketball at Yale. He was playing quarterback in a pickup football game I was playing in. And I hit this guy running full speed, form tackle as hard as I could. I just bounced off him. Joe Burrow would not feel me. I promise you that.
That's a fun way to end what's been a not as... I mean, our shows are... I always have fun doing these, but it's annoying. Say annoying. Fast start. Hey, start fast with rookie guards.
There's some stories that you're sick of talking about after
veteran guards.
Yeah. Guard issues, starting fast.
And now, like, the irony here really is like, all right, well, yeah, now we're going to hit the ground running. And it's like, okay, well, let's say you do that. Like, now you're exposing your guys. Like, it's just, there are certain guys that I would worry about. That's all.
There's always a give and take.
Yep.
There's always risk. And that's what you have to manage. And
20 plays, Joe. 20 plays.
In so many aspects, really. And then on top of that, Zach's talking about the offseason program as well, and changes that he's anticipating in that area. We'll be very curious to see what that looks like. He's talking a lot about like alignment again seemed to be the theme, and getting the players more on the same page, not necessarily talking about amping up the intensity, strictly speaking, for the offseason program. So we'll see what that looks like. And that's coming soon. I mean, we're almost there to offseason workouts. I mean, the draft is obviously the biggest event coming up, but offseason practices are not too far off. And when we get there, we'll have plenty to talk about there. Tomorrow it's Katie Blackburn and takeaways from Katie down at the Owners meetings, as she spoke to the media on Tuesday as well. Until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.